Okay, so we're continuing chapter 1 and moving on to evolution and classification of life. Advance. Okay, so evolution has to do with change over time, right? So as species are adapting to their environment and trying to figure out how they can survive in the environment, they kind of slowly change and they kind of diversify. And we'll see that a little bit in the example. But remember, previously we had talked about that, how the hawk, some hawk can search for fish, while other ones can do rabbits. And so depending on its environment, it might have adapted to a certain way. So this is what we mean by evolution. And so we use this classification scheme to be able to organize this diversity, right? So we have down here, we have our bacteria. So this is our prokaryotes. So bacteria and prokaryotes in general do not have a nucleus. That's one of the main things that define them from a eukarya, right? So that's one big distinction is that both bacteria and archaea have no nucleus. So let's see if I can actually write that down. No, ugh, this pen is so thick. Oh, sorry. This is really hard to write. Okay, well, you guys, you heard what I said. There's no nucleus, whereas the eukarya does have a nucleus in it. So that's the distinction. But as we evolve, so we go from bacteria, and as we kind of evolve to the archaea, and then eventually the eukarya, we get more and more diverse and just more and more complex. Okay, so this is an example of this evolution, right? Descent with modification. So here we have this Hawaiian honey creeper. This is an example. So they all evolve from all these different birds right here that we're looking at. Let me move myself down. Are all different finches, right? So they all originally evolved from finch, and depending on their environment and what they have to eat, whether or not is the flower and the plants that they're going after, or the different insects that are going after, their beaks will evolve. So you can kind of imagine that this guy probably has a very different source compared to, let's say, this guy right here, right? Where the beak's a little bit smaller, and then you can look at this beak, compared to like this beak, right? So all of these different beaks and body shape, like how big they are versus how small they are, right? So this is small, whereas this is a little bit larger. These are all different ways that they have evolve and diversify over time in order to be able to survive in their environment. And so one way for us to be able to really stay organized as we look at these diverse set of species is to use what's called taxonomy. And we'll visit taxonomy later on when we actually look at the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom in a little more detail. But just to introduce you guys to this, right? We start with the highest one, which is domain. So for humans, for example, we're eukaryotes, right? So we have nucleus, we have a lot of different organelles. That's kind of what distinguishes us from like the prokaryote. And then as we move down, the kingdom that we're in is Amelias. And then we're in the phylum of chordates. So we have the spinal cord, which is what makes it so that we're in this phylum. And as we go down to class, we're mammals because we actually, one of the big distinction between a mammal versus like, let's say a bird, right, is that we actually nurse, we have milk glands, whereas birds don't have milk gland. And typically we have fur and hair. And then if you look at our order, right, so we're getting more and more specific. So it starts off really inclusive, right? Eukarya includes like plants and trees and fungi. But then as we get more and more detail as we go down to taxonomy. So now we have primates, like humans are primates, because they have fingers that they can grasp. That's one of the main distinction. And then family-wise, they're hominin, right? So the hominin, they have like other features that are similar to other primates, but specifically we look at like the way that we visualize and like our face and stuff like that. That makes it so that we are distinguished as hominin. And then you've heard that we're Homo sapien, so our genus is Homo, and then specifically the species that we are is sapien. So we're Homo sapiens, so all Homo sapiens can like basically breed with other Homo sapiens. So that's what makes us a single species. So one way to remember this taxonomy for most inclusive So like eukarya includes a lot, right? To least inclusive is to think of dumb King Philip cried out for goodness sake. That's like one way to kind of remember, right? So the domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. All right, let's move on. And we're going to actually look at all like a bunch of different domains and kind of introduce you guys to them. Okay, so the first one is domain archaea. So archaea are, they can live in really extreme environments. So we tend to find them in really hot volcanoes, very salty environments, and they're prokaryotes, but they are similar to bacteria in that they don't have a nucleus, but the difference that distinguishes them is just the environments that they live in. Also, they have like some different composition on their cell membrane, that is the outside of their cell. The lipid, which is fat, and we'll talk about that later on when we do macromolecule, is the composition is a little different. Okay, so next we have the domain bacteria, fast forward a little bit, which is also a prokaryote. So that is, they also don't have a nucleus. They don't have like really, really that many, like the same hierarchy as far as structure as eukaryote with regards to their organelle. And they're really diverse. And that's because bacteria can kind of live almost anywhere. And it's really, their environment can be very particular. That is that some bacteria that we can find, we can't actually even grow them in the laboratory because they're very particular to their environment. And one way to demonstrate that is in your mouth, you have a lot of bacteria. And do you know that the bacteria that you have in the roof of your mouth is not the same as the bacteria that you have in your cheeks, which is not the same as the bacteria that you have in your tongue. So they can be very specific. Okay, now we're going to look at eukarya. We're going to look at, there's many different eukarya. Remember, eukarya is pretty diverse. So the first one we're going to look at is specifically the kingdom Protista. So protists are really diverse. They are single cell. However, a lot of single cells can get together and kind of act as a colony of multiple cells. So then they can form this like multicellular form. And they are able to use photosynthesis. So that means they actually have chloroplast. So they have a nucleus, but they also have chloroplast. And so they can actually manufacture food, and they can also acquire food too, but they can also manufacture food from like the sun because they can do photosynthesis. So this includes algae and protozoa and water mold. And they tend to live in wet environments. Domain eukarya, kingdom fungi, you probably recognize this. You're very familiar with mold and mushrooms that we consume. So you know that pink, no, I'll skip that part. But the mold that we actually, that you see, as well as mushrooms, they count, what distinguishes this kingdom is that they can actually help with decomposing dead organisms. And so that's kind of how they acquire their material and their energy. So this is kingdom fungi. And then you have kingdom plantae, which is really diverse, right? We have plants. They're multicellular. They can photosynthesize, so we can capture sun energy and make it into material energy right here, right? And so there's so many examples, everything from the redwood groves to a daffodil. You know, those are all different types of plants, right? And then is our kingdom, which is Animalia. So we are we're part of that group. And but in addition to us, that would also include your pets, it also includes like birds that you see in the environment, jaguars, crocodiles, like those are all different animals. And we're multicellular, so it takes more than just one cell, right? We're multicellular, and we can't make our own food. So unlike protists and plants, we actually have to ingest either plants or other animals in order to actually get our material and energy source. All right, so let's do a quick question. So let's say that you go on an outdoor outing and you find these species. They look like they're unicellular. So here are some examples of maybe what you found. And they have like nucleus and they have a chloroplast. Which kingdom do you think this species is likely to live in or belong to? I'll give you guys a few seconds. Okay, so hopefully you answer protists, right? So plants, while they also have a chloroplast, they are not they're not unicellular. They tend to be multicellular. Plant is not animal. We don't have chloroplast. Proteins does have chloroplast. They're able to photosynthesize. They're also a lot of times unicellular. Remember we said they're unicellular. Sometimes they form colonies of multi, and so they can take on this multicellular form. Fungi, again, are not unicellular, or nor do they do photosynthesis. And prokaryote, why they are unicellular, we're going to look at the idea that they do not do photosynthesis usually. Okay, so most likely what you found when you were outdoors is a protease. Okay, we'll stop here for now.